They laughed because it looked impossible. A steel Quonset hut did not belong in a cliff crack. It belonged in army yards, supply depots, flat ground where trucks could reach it and men could bolt it together in open daylight. Not here. Not wedged between two towering slabs of granite, where only the front half could be seen. But that was exactly where Caleb Mercer put it. The valley road curved below the ridge, and anyone traveling it could look up and see the strange sight. A rounded steel doorway framed by stone walls rising 50 feet on either side, like some giant had swallowed the building and left only its face exposed. Children called it the mountain can. Men called it worse. Jonas Hale laughed loudest. He wrote out the week Caleb finished the placement, bringing 2 friends and a grin that arrived before he did. Caleb was tightening bolts on the front frame when hoofbeats crunched through old snow. Jonas stopped below the rock split and looked up slowly. "Well now," he called. "Never thought I'd see a man lose an argument with a mountain." The riders laughed. Caleb kept turning the wrench. Jonas climbed down and walked closer, studying the steel arch fitted deep inside the crevice. The Quonset's curved shell disappeared backward into shadow between the stone walls. Only the front face, wooden door, and chimney pipe were visible from outside. "You get stuck hauling it in there?" Jonas asked. "No." "You sure? Looks trapped." "It's anchored." That earned another laugh. Jonas slapped one of the granite walls. "So your plan is what? Let the rocks keep you company while winter freezes the rest of you?" Caleb finally stood. "My plan is to let the rocks keep the wind off me." Jonas smirked. "Stone doesn't make heat." "No," Caleb said. "It stops losing it." The answer annoyed Jonas because it sounded sensible. He recovered quickly. "You could have built a normal cabin. I could have chopped twice the wood." That silenced the others for a moment. Then Jonas snorted. "Come January, we'll see how warm your cave can stays." They rode off laughing. Caleb returned to work. The truth was simpler than anyone imagined. He had found the crevice in late spring while scouting timber. 2 granite walls stood barely wider than a wagon, running deep into the hillside like a split made by giants. The passage faced south, sheltered from the north wind by the mountain itself. Most men saw wasted stone. Caleb saw ready-made protection. When an abandoned Quonset shell came up for sale from an old rail camp, he bought it cheap, cut it shorter, reinforced the ribs. Then with rollers, jacks, ropes, and 3 weeks of stubbornness, he slid it into the crevice until the rear nearly touched bedrock. After that, he sealed the side gaps with timber framing, clay, and packed stone. The mountain became his outer wall. Inside, he lined the steel ribs with planks and insulation made from straw, wool scraps, and sawdust sacks. A raised wooden floor kept him off the cold ground. Near the center stood a compact iron stove surrounded by stone slabs that held heat long after the fire dropped low. Above, the granite walls rose high enough to break crosswinds entirely. Snow could fall at the front, but drifting deep inside was nearly impossible. It was less a hut than a shelter inserted into geology. That was why people mocked it. They only understood buildings built against weather, not buildings built with it. Autumn passed with jokes. "He lives in a crack. Must sleep standing up. Wait till the rocks squeeze tighter in winter." Caleb ignored them. He spent his days sealing seams, adjusting the chimney draft, and testing how the crevice handled changing winds. Some evenings he stood outside and watched gusts strike the ridge. They slammed into the cliff faces, split, and rushed past both sides of the entrance without touching the doorway. Good. That mattered most. The first hard frost came early. Fields whitened overnight. Water troughs froze at the edges. In town, men lit stoves sooner than usual. Caleb lit one modest fire at dusk. The hut warmed slowly, then steadily. The steel shell absorbed heat, but the inner lining slowed loss. The stone around the stove stored warmth. Most important, the mountain blocked the endless wind that robbed ordinary cabins faster than fire could replace it. He used less wood than expected. Much less. A week later, Jonas returned pretending curiosity again. He stepped through the front door with mock confidence. Then paused. Warmth met him immediately. Not roaring heat. Even heat. The air was still. No drafts under the door. No corners leaking cold. He looked at the stove. That little thing. Caleb nodded. For now. Jonas ran a hand along the inner plank wall. Dry? Warm. He straightened fast, embarrassed by his own reaction. "It's October," he said. "Even a shed feels decent in October." Then visit in January. Jonas smirked. I will. He left quickly. Then the north wind came. Across the valley it struck like a debt collector. Cabins rattled. Loose boards sang. Smoke blew sideways from chimneys. Men stuffed cloth into gaps they had meant to repair months earlier. At the rock crevice, the wind hit granite and split harmlessly around the entrance. Inside, Caleb heard only distant rushing. The first snow followed. Then a second. Then a dry, bitter cold that sank into exposed timber like teeth. Town fires burned hotter and longer. Woodpiles shrank alarmingly. Children were moved into kitchen rooms because bedrooms froze first. One family slept in shifts near their hearth. Up on the ridge, snow gathered outside Caleb's doorway but did not drift inward. The crevice walls shielded the entrance. The mountain temperature changed slowly, moderating extremes. His stove burned low and steady. By midwinter, he measured the room one dawn. 56 degrees. Outside, 40 below. He smiled and added one stick to the fire. Then came the blizzard. The kind old men compare all future storms to. Wind screamed through the valley, so hard barn doors tore free. Snow erased fences by sunset and buried wagon wheels standing still. Families fought cold and panicked together. At the crevice, the storm blasted the ridge and split itself uselessly on stone. Caleb sat at the table drinking coffee when pounding struck the front door. 3 hard blows. Then again. He opened it against packed snow. Jonas Hale stumbled in white with frost, beard frozen stiff, eyes stripped of pride. Our chimney collapsed, he said hoarsely. House fills with smoke if we light it, freezes if we don't. He looked past Caleb into the warm, still room, then back at the stone walls outside. The crack in the mountain, he whispered. He swallowed hard. Please. Caleb stepped aside at once. Bring them. Jonas stared, stunned by how quickly the answer came. You'd help after all the... Bring them, Caleb repeated. Storms waste enough time already. Jonas turned and ran back into the white. Caleb shut the door against the wind and moved quickly through the hut. He fed 2 logs into the stove, set kettles on top, pulled extra blankets from a chest, cleared the rear sleeping platform. Then he checked the doorway seal and waited. The mountain did most of the waiting with him. Outside, wind screamed across the ridge, but inside the crevice only a muffled rushing remained. The granite walls swallowed violence and returned silence. Minutes later the pounding came again. Jonas entered first, carrying his youngest daughter wrapped in quilts. Behind him came his wife with another child, then Jonas's mother leaning heavily on a stick. They stepped inside and froze in a different way. Warmth. Stillness. No smoke. No cutting draft. No walls trembling. Jonas's wife put one hand to her mouth and began to cry quietly. Boots there, Caleb said calmly. Wet things by the door? Child near the stove first. They obeyed instantly. The little girl's cheeks were pale and waxy. Caleb handed Jonas's wife a mug of warm water. Small sips. Slow. Jonas stood in the center of the room, turning as if he expected the trick to reveal itself. The curved steel ceiling was dry. The plank-lined walls were warm to the touch. The fire burned low, yet the room held steady comfort from front to back. You're using almost no wood, Jonas said. I'm not heating the valley, Caleb replied. Jonas lowered his eyes. Before he could answer, more pounding struck the door. Caleb looked at him. How many know you came? Jonas hesitated. Enough. Caleb nodded and opened the door. Mrs. Carter from the lower road stumbled in next, wrapped in blankets and snow. Behind her were the Miller boys, then old Rowan with soot on his coat where sparks had burned through. The valley had finally learned directions to the mountain cairn. Through the night, they came in 2s and 3s. Some because chimneys failed. Some because doors iced shut and heat leaked faster than they could feed it. Some because fear finally overcame pride. The Quonset hut filled steadily. Children slept along the rear platform. Women sat shoulder to shoulder near the stone stove surround. Men who once laughed at the steel shell now stood silently with hands spread toward the warmth, listening to a storm they could barely hear. No one joked. The mountain had ended that. Caleb managed the room with practical calm. Rotate places nearest the stove. Keep the doors shut tight. Dry gloves on the rack. No one blocks the chimney draft. If you're warm, move back for someone colder. Simple rules. They worked. The granite walls behind the hut held a deep stored coolness from summer and a steadiness from the earth itself. The The crevice blocked nearly all direct wind. Snow piling outside narrowed the entrance further, adding insulation instead of danger. Everything the storm threw at the shelter made it stronger. Around midnight, Jonas sat beside Caleb near the table. "All my life," he said quietly, "I thought strength meant standing alone." Caleb poured hot water into 2 mugs. "No," he said, "that's pride." Jonas looked around the crowded room. "Then what's strength?" "Knowing where to stand." Jonas said nothing after that. By dawn, the blizzard worsened one final time. Wind roared so hard across the ridge that snow hissed against the stone like thrown sand. Somewhere below in town, something large collapsed with a crack no one inside could see. Yet within the crevice shelter, children still slept. The stove ticked softly. Steam rose from kettles. A baby laughed once in its sleep. People heard that and smiled as if it were a miracle. By midday, the storm began to break. The wind dropped first. Then the snow eased into drifting flakes. Caleb opened the door carefully. A wall of white stood outside, but the entrance itself was clear enough to shovel because the crevice had prevented major drifting. Men dug outward together. When they reached the ridge edge, the valley below lay buried and changed. Fences vanished. Roofs sagged. One barn had lost half its side. Smoke rose from only a few chimneys. People turned slowly and looked back at the shelter behind them. Only the front showed. A steel doorway set between towering stone walls. Warm light behind it. Dry footprints leading in and out. Jonas stood beside Caleb, face tired and humbled. "I called this place a crack." Caleb took up a shovel. "It is." Jonas frowned. "That's all you've got." Caleb glanced at the granite walls. A crack wide enough to hold everyone who mattered. For the first time in days, laughter returned. Real laughter. Tired, grateful, human. The weeks after the storm remade the valley. Men repaired roofs and rebuilt chimneys, but they also began studying land differently. Rock outcrops once ignored became windbreaks. Hillsides became shelter walls. South-facing cuts became building sites. Cabins were moved closer to ridges. Storage sheds were dug into banks. Stone walls rose around exposed homes. People stopped building on land and started building with it. They asked Caleb endless questions. How deep was the hut inserted? How were side gaps sealed? Would smaller crevices work? What direction should entrances face? How much wood had he burned all winter? He answered plainly. Enough to help, not enough to boast. By spring, snowmelt revealed something else. The Quonset had suffered almost no damage. No roof string, no wall warping, no broken shutters. The mountain had carried the burden. Jonas visited one bright April morning with lumber in his wagon. "For shelves," he said awkwardly. "Thought you could use them." Caleb accepted the boards. "Good pine. Straight cuts." "Thank you." Jonas shifted. "I was wrong." "I know." Jonas laughed despite himself. "You enjoy saying that." "Less than I enjoyed being warm." Together they built the shelves while the valley below hammered, dug, and copied lessons learned the hard way. By the next winter, homes tucked against ridges, stone walls, and earth banks dotted the valley everywhere. And no one called Caleb's place the mountain kin anymore. They had a new name for it. The shelter that taught them. It still looked impossible from the road. A steel doorway wedged into a cliff crack where only the front showed. But now everyone understood the truth hidden in plain sight. The smartest home is not the one that stands alone. It's the one the storm cannot reach.